All right. Hello to everyone out there, present or in the future, who may watch this. I'm Colin Blanchette. I am here with Ray Carcases. Ray, am I saying your last name correctly?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. As Ray and I were just talking before we hopped on here, we've known each other now for about 6 years, thanks to the miracle and the curse that is social media. But this is the first time we've ever spoken face to face like this. So I'm very excited. And I was very excited, Ray, that you decided to participate in this
Of
Ride with the
course.
Mask on number three. Um,
Yeah.
I know you had some reservations going in. So why don't you tell me about your reservations and your thoughts when I first approached you about it?
Well, my reservations basically were that, like, for the last 6 years, I haven't read superhero comics, maybe one here or there, but really got out of superhero comics completely. Did a deep dive into indies from the 90s, manga. And I basically had the attitude of, like, yeah, no more. I spent like 40 years reading superhero comics. I'm done with it. I don't want to go back. And so that was my mindset. And then when you asked, I was like, at first, like, oh man, I don't want to revisit. And secondly, I was like, how in the hell do I do this? Because I haven't read anything the last 6 years. And I was resistant, but like I've mentioned, I just find it hard to say no to you. You've always been very generous with your knowledge and your time. You're a good guy. I appreciate everything you shared with me and all the recommendations for great graphic novels. So I was sort of like, okay, I'll do it for Colin, um, literally. And so at first, I had no idea what to do. Fortunately, you were all very liberal with the rules. So that helped. And then I just started looking at a lot of top 100 lists just to get an idea and then said, okay, I'm going to base on what I've read. And there's a lot of great comic runs that I've never read. Um, but I just said, okay, I'm going to base on what I've read, and hopefully my picks aren't too antiquated.
Yeah, no, I don't think so at all. I mean, I think every one of us, from the youngest to the oldest, you can probably pin down our ages pretty well looking at our
Hmm.
lists. I mean, most of
Right.
us, you grew up reading superheroes, and you can kind of tell, oh, you must have been around this age at this time, and it really had an effect. But um, no, I mean, you had a bunch of stuff that was newer than things I had, um, and I mean that shows kind of the wide amount of stuff you had read over your course of reading superhero comics, and the fact that you kept an open mind when you were older um, shows something. I think a lot of people, especially superhero readers, really get locked into what they loved when they were a certain age, and
Eh,
um, the only time they like new stuff is when it riffs on the old stuff.
I agree. I liken a lot to music. I liken comics a lot to music, and I've always been a person that likes to listen to new music. What's the new type of music? Who are new artists? Because everybody thinks that, let's say, the 80s or 90s or 70s, whatever, were like the greatest era. No, you're just hearing the greatest hits. There was a lot of bad music then too. So I like to, and the same thing with comics. So I like to always listen to, like, what's going on. Maybe it's because I had kids when I was older. And so I like to keep an open mind because you can revere the old stuff, but then the new stuff keeps the old stuff fresher. But I agree with you. There's a lot of people that there's a certain era, especially in superhero comics, and that's it. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Um, yeah, sometimes it's the only explanation for why people love certain things, right? I mean, it's hard to imagine if you weren't 14 when Rob Liefeld hit the scene, why would you respond to it? And I was 14 when Rob Liefeld hit the scene, and it still only took me a year or two to get out of it and go, okay, that's enough of that. But I'm surprised how many people are still, that would be their peak
Oh
of
my
of
God.
Western culture.
Yeah. It's amazing to me. And if you tell them, look, man, nothing personal, but Rob Liefeld, in my opinion,
Mhm.
sucks. Oh my God. It's like you said something terrible about the Pope. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a real, it's almost like not a cult, but let's just say it's a very strong fan following, and I'll just keep it at that.
Yeah, yeah. I almost admire how he's been able to keep a hold on his fans for this long. Um
Hmm.
so so tell me about your process when you went to make the list. Like you said you went and looked up a bunch of lists online. I I did the same thing. All the lists I found online were terrible. Um
Hmm.
and I thought, wow, pretty much no matter what we do, we'll probably be the best top 100 superhero list ever made. Not that that's like the greatest accomplishment, but I thought we're going to have some intelligent people who've read a bunch of comics do this stuff. Um, but I am curious about like how you did it. I mean, how just what was your
Well,
process?
I decided that I went through. I still have short boxes with the comics that I've kept, the superhero comics that I've kept. And I kept those primarily because I really liked those runs. If there was there I, Several years ago, I went through my long boxes, and I gave a art teacher who taught at my son's elementary school. He was into comics. I said, "You want some comics?" I said, and at the time there were more, within the last few years. And he goes, yeah. And I gave him like five long boxes. And what I kept was what I really liked. So it was easy to go through those short boxes and say, oh, okay, I really like the Jason Aaron Doctor Strange run. So that's why I had a list. I still have my original Swamp Things from the 1980s. Even in the late 80s, early 90s, I had this stupid idea that, oh, comics are for kids and I'm an adult now, so I'm going to get rid of them. And I did, like a
Mhm.
buffoon. But I kept those Alan Moore Swamp Things. I know I
Yeah.
regret it to this day. Trust me. It's like, not because of, oh, it was so valuable. It was like, I just had a great ton of comics, like the Miller Daredevils, the first run, and all that stuff that still reads well today. So I went through that to get ideas, and then I went through my graphic novels to get ideas. Um, and then I started going online to get ideas for books that I had read, but I no longer had in my possession, like the Daredevil run by Miller and Jansen from 79 to like the early 80s. Um,
Mhm.
Things like that. And I just started slowly putting together a list. And it was hard to get to 100, but I still have certain. So I was able to like go through that. And that was basically my process. And then after that, it was ranking them. And I figured, you know what, I'm just going to rank them based on what I like everybody else, and we'll see
Yeah.
what happens.
Did you find the ranking to be hard? Did you sweat over any of it, or did it come pretty naturally?
First 10, 15, 20 was pretty easy, I think, for probably for everybody. But then
Yeah.
after a while, it's like, is this really better than this? And after a while, it was like I came to the realization, I think, and I wrote that in the notes that are in the back of issue 3, that if I would have done visited this list 100 times, I would have probably come up with 100 different orders. So at some
Yeah.
point, it's like, okay, this is the order. It may not be exact, but it'll never be exact. It's not the final list. It's going to be just offering books in there and see what happens.
Yeah.
And and
Yeah,
and
real
I'm
quick.
sorry, but
No,
as a
go ahead.
Liefeld joke on my list, I did put number 101, Deathmate Red.
That's right. That's right.
I'm sorry, I had a little. I always have a little Liefeld shot. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, you're good. I just want to say hi to Vic Shade. He showed up in one of the previous.
Hey, Vic.
I think he was in the Jeremy live stream a few days ago. I did the same thing with my comics. I was tired of lugging them around and got rid of them for practically nothing. Thank goodness we live in a golden age for collected editions. Very true.
Very
Um,
true.
yeah, no, my process sounds about the same as yours, and I agree with you. The top ones were really easy to have like kind of firm convictions, but when you're down when you're like at 89, 90, you really do just feel like, what am I doing sweating over this? Does it matter which thing I'm putting in front of the other? Um,
Agreed.
but you said that you had a hard time getting to 100.
Well, the reason why is that there's a lot of great superhero runs, many of them on the list that I've never
Mm-hmm.
read. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna apologize for this in front. I've never read Batman Year One, and I actually try to
Okay.
check it out in the library, and it's all checked out. I have to wait on a waiting list to show you how
Yeah.
popular that it still is. I uh, I know the Sandman wasn't a superhero technically, but like I only read like the first 12 issues recent last 2 3 years. There's a lot of superhero runs that are there that I were on the list that I've never read, and therefore it was harder for me because there's a lot of books that I hadn't read, and so in that respect. Um,
Gotcha.
and so it was mostly that it was like, well, I can't add this. I love to add this. I'm sure if I read Batman Year One it'd be in there, but I didn't. So that was kind of why. And I just think I hadn't revisited superhero comics in so long
Yeah.
that it was just like having to get like my muscle memory back as far as like what was really good.
Yeah. No, I get that. I was sure I'd have the opposite problem, that there would be like, hundreds and hundreds that I would, at least put on a long list. But the reality was I only had about 150 things I really considered.
Right.
Um, and then, it wasn't nearly that many that I really considered, because like I went back and reread a few things and went, oh, this is terrible. I really loved it when I was 15, but now it's not nearly as charming as I thought it was. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
that's the danger of reading stuff when you were young.
This
Um,
is why I don't revisit a lot of old comics, and I've
yeah,
wrote this on my Substack, and I just as a theme, I get keep recurring that I don't do, and I think I wrote that in the in review, or I said that in review for Savage Tales of 1980, where I'm not a big fan of nostalgia, only if it's good. I mean,
yeah,
like there's certain cartoons like I used to watch when I was a kid, the Herculoids and stuff like on reruns, and I look at it now, I'm like, oh my god, it's terrible. Or Johnny Quest is like the intro and the outro are like top tier. The middle of it is like, well, I don't know about this. It's like you just abduct this Indian kid and decide to take him somewhere, but but so I'm not a big nostalgia fan, and that's part because I've gone back and read some of these books, and it's like, oh my God. It's like, are they getting paid by the word or what?
right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the most shocking things to anyone under the age of 40 when they see comics from the 80s and before. They're so wordy.
Oh yeah.
And
Roy, Roy
some writers do
Thomas,
it better than others.
that
Yeah,
Roy
Roy Thomas.
Thomas, Chris
Yeah,
Claremont. I mean, more could be wordy, but it added to the story. That's like some of the Swamp Things, but it wasn't always that way. He kind of knew like I have to be wordy here, I have to have limited dialogue here. I got some tremendous artists working on these books that can do the storytelling, but like this is why like I have a hard time rereading Chris Claremont or Roy Thomas books. Especially, that I think you mentioned that what if issue of what if Conan came into the modern era in the
yeah.
1980s. I
Mhm.
read that issue and I used to love that first volume of What If because they would get the regular teams to do it. But you have John Buscema, who's like one of the greatest comic artists, ever. And he's
Yeah,
showing you in storytelling what he's doing. But then Roy Thomas takes great pains to tell you exactly what Conan is doing, but you can read what he's doing. And it's like, okay, we're not here for you. We're here for the art. And like that's why I always this is sidetrack. That's why I always like Miller's Daredevil, because he was the first guy to say, I'm gonna show you, not tell you.
yeah.
So I'm sorry to segue. But yeah, they're real very wordy.
No, that's good. That's a good segue. I mean, yeah, I think Miller was one of the first guys to really be brave enough to say, let's strip it all back and
Mm-hmm.
see, people can just follow this, and it's gonna seem more, quote unquote cinematic, um, if the captions aren't just giant chunks of text all over the place while you have two people fighting.
Right.
Um, yeah, you mentioned more. So I pulled out your list to look at it again,
Uh-oh.
and no, it's good. I was having fun looking at it. It's been now a few months since we did this, so I've
Right.
kind of I forgot some of my own list. Um,
So did I.
but
Don't
yeah,
worry.
no. So you have your first three are all Alan Moore's. Watchmen, Swamp Thing, Miracle Man.
Yeah.
Watchmen, I guess, pretty obvious. I mean, it's, I was talking to Jeremy the other night, and I said, I never really considered Watchmen to be a superhero book, but I definitely think Watchmen's the best book on the list, without a doubt. And my objection to it being a superhero book doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, I know that going in, it's just my own personal, the way I've thought.
Right, but no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, you're good. So you having Watchmen number one makes a lot of sense. I mean, these all make sense. I more just wanted to get into your thinking. I know you love the Swamp Thing run. And am I right in the Miracle Man run you read relatively recently? Is that right?
I read that maybe within the last 10 years, maybe the last 10 years or so, like when Marvel started doing the reprints, maybe 15. I read them all. I had read them in the first decade, but then I read back and reread them when Marvel started doing the reprints, and I was I just really loved how Moore was sort of unshackled with, okay, we got to keep this property alive for 100 years, so we're not going to really resolve anything, and it was just such a unique resolution to that first arc that I just thought this is complete, and it still leaves it a little open ended. You have a lot of this science fiction stuff, and then you have one of the goriest mainstream superhero books ever made in issue, I think, 14. I mean, I wrote that too. I think that and Thor Vikings are probably some of the goriest superhero books ever made. Just just things like that you wouldn't expect. Like, you wouldn't expect Miracle Man to like throw a bus full of people at young Miracle Man to just try to fight him. And people are saying, well, the legends say that if the bus was empty, but really nobody really knows for sure. Like, it's not like, oh, I must get the people off this bus before I throw it at him. It's like, hey, I don't care, man. I gotta kill this dude.
Yeah.
That's what I like, that pushing of boundaries.
Yeah, the first, I guess, like 6 issues of Miracle Man. I had read that. I read that when I was young. I found a trade paperback of it, somewhere, and eventually I read the whole thing. But that first chunk, that first book, just blew my mind when I was a kid. It was an approach that I had never seen that before. And I still think it's really special, even after all these years of people imitating Alan Moore the best they can. He still really had his finger on something.
Yeah, his mind just built different. I mean, I never appreciated I liked him, but I never appreciated how good he was until Chris Claremont did that Cartoonist Kayfabe interview, where I found out that he doesn't stop talking. But even he had the cop that they were all reading Alan Moore, and you could just tell that they were like, just a look on his face, you could just tell like he had to begrudgingly admit that Moore was the best. And I'm like, okay, a guy with his ego admitting that Moore is the best, that he's, I mean, if I didn't know any better, I would know then. And it's like, okay, he was doing the best work. And so, I read that recently. I just thought it was just so way ahead of its time. And that's probably why they still read so well, because they're so way ahead of their time and so unique in their approach that they're not the same old superhero stuff. They're not doing the whole, oh, I must roll my body to weaken the force when I land on the ground and all this sort of stuff. It's just like none of that stuff. All that stuff is like not needed.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing in your top 10 that really stood out to me, it's a comic that did not make the final list, it's the only one in your top 10. Is the Avengers by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. You're not the only person that voted for that run, but I was surprised you had it so high. I loved that. I love those comics. I guess I don't really have a question other than what is it that appeals to you, and it's placed in the middle of so many of these like sophisticated Alan Moore and Frank Miller, and those are pretty like straightforward, just fun superhero comics.
Well, I mean, they're fun. I mean, you got like kind of like measured against the style of story that came around in the early 60s. Like you can't compare it to Watchmen or something. But I
Sure.
just thought of it as like, besides, in my mind, maybe I'm wrong, that sort of did a lot of things. It made the Avengers cool because you had Captain America like a real like the de facto leader. They segued from the Hulk out to the Captain America in. They
Mhm.
did that. Kirby's pencils were really strong. Just the fact that they were able to come up with Captain America, and I think that kind of like, I mean, there are other things going on in the Marvel universe, but I sort of think that that made the Avengers cooler. You're able to have Captain America's own comic. You're able to have a link to the past. So I kind of put that there. A lot of it, maybe like Watchmen too, a lot of it because I like the comic a lot and I love the stories, that pure joy, that sense of wonder. But just
Mhm.
because so much came from that decision to bring him back. Like as far as like an iconic book, if you look at it, it's like, I mean, can you imagine if they decided, hey, we're not going to bring Captain America back?
Mhm.
The movies would have suffered. There's so many storylines, so many issues, so parts of so many teams. I mean, he became one of the, like one of the, what do they call it? The Marvel Trinity, him,
Mhm.
Thor, and Iron Man. I mean, you just look at it, and that's where they brought him in. I just thought it was a really cool idea of like, hey, the Hulk is out. We're gonna put Captain America in, and we're gonna froze him in a block of ice, and somehow miraculously through comic book science be revived. And I just thought that was a cool idea. So that's why I put him there because I just thought it was iconic in that whole Marvel, like starting with Fantastic Four and then getting hot with Spider Man, and then hey, we're gonna make the Avengers cool. Kind of like I thought it was like that extra next jump,
Yeah.
and that's why I kind of put him there. I mean, I put Spider Man, the Stan Lee Steve Ditko Spider Man at 4. I'm looking at my list. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's great.
and the Fantastic Four, I had them spread out. I had 48 through 50 in the top 10, but
Mhm.
um, but I mean but I thought that whole Kirby Lee run, especially like the latter half, were just some really special comics. But that's
Mhm.
why. I mean, sorry it's long winded, but that's why I put it there because I just thought it was really important for that early genesis of the Marvel comics. And I'm a big, I mean, I'm not super patriot right wing nut, but Captain America has always been my favorite superhero.
Okay.
Yeah, so,
Interesting.
but that's part of, maybe that's part of it too. Maybe it's some nostalgia, but I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. Um, I think it's right after Kirby leaves, but I really like the
You're right. You're right.
issue 16 when they switch the whole team over. Everybody leaves but Captain America, and they bring in Hawkeye and Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver.
Right.
Just the idea of changing the entire team out and having and really reducing the power level of the team. Um, when I first read those comics as a teenager, I was just really blown away because you would have never seen. By the 80s, everything was kind of set. They wouldn't do anything that drastic. Um,
Right.
and they just sort of did it like here's another issue. It wasn't some big event. It's just everyone's taken off, and we're going in a totally different direction.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, it was a great way to introduce new characters or characters that had like not really been exposed. Um, I agree with you. I just liked how they would do that, and then it's like, yeah, okay, we're gonna have some different people, and yeah, I agree. I miss the days that Marvel just took chances and said, hey, let's see what the hell happens. If not, we'll
yeah.
just shake it up again.
Yeah. No. A lot of fun. Those old Marvels. I also, looking through your list, noticed. I don't know if I caught all of them, but I think I saw Jim Shooter's name 3 times. Um,
Probably.
yeah, I mean, Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. You and I think, have talked about our affection for the early Valiants, and you have Magnus on here, and then you also have his Superboy starring the Legion of Superheroes run, and Alpha and Omega, the Solar Man of the Atom run. Oh, you also
which
have
I have.
Rye on here.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's at least four Jim Shooters. Yeah, I mean he's such a controversial figure, but you been around long enough to have read some of his comics. Unlike, I mean, anyone younger than 45 probably never read a Jim
no.
Shooter comic. So yeah, please just talk about Jim Shooter for a minute and what appealed to you about any of his comics.
Well, okay. Jim Shooter, we all know that he ended up being a pariah.
Mm-hmm.
No publisher would hire him. Um, and if you speak to people, which I actually did at a con, I spoke to a couple of people that worked for him with them at Valiant. They literally, one of them literally told me, "I hate him." And I mean, you would know the name too if I told you. I just don't want to say it
Yeah,
because, but you would know the
sure.
name if I told you, you would know the name. And they said, and because I had just there was a panel with Jim Shooter, and the guy who used to be the CEO of Marvel when he came from Fleer.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I forget his name. Um, when he was starting his weird Ratchet comic book company based on the Living Dead, they were on a panel together, and I went to a signing with Jim Shooter, and he was actually really charming and super knowledgeable about comics. You give him a comic that he did, and he'd tell you about it. Oh yeah, I remember this and
Mm-hmm.
this and this. I mean, he knew it wasn't like some bullshit. And he was and during the panel, he was really entertaining and really charming. And I went to this guy and asked him, "You work with Shooter, right?" And they're like, "Yeah, I hate him." And I kind of like talked to him about it. So I know he's disliked or hated by a lot of people that work for him. I know that he did a lot of mistakes. But I think if you look back at history, it's that thing of like the time changes the lens. You look at he did a lot of things that were dumb ideas like New Universe. His ego got to him, but at the same time, he did a lot of great things. He was willing to do new things just to see if it would catch on. Um, as much as he would love to read Bill Sienkiewicz hate letters to Bill Sienkiewicz in the office, he refused to take him off of New Mutants, and he actually wanted to have him on X-Men. Um, and he put him and Frank Miller together. He did a lot of good, and I thought his early Valiants were really good comics. I didn't like. I was older, so by the time I turned close to 30, I just didn't like the Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Wills
Sure.
Portacio stuff. I mean, the art's great, Todd McFarlane, but the storytelling wasn't there. Um, I just didn't like. I didn't like to focus on big guns. I didn't like to focus on like female characters that went from like just female characters to like baddies.
Mm-hmm.
In a heartbeat. There's a lot of things because I was older, and those early Valiants really um, were more of a pure superhero kind of vibe. But as far as Shooter goes, I just think that he did a lot of great work. He did a lot of interesting things. He screwed up a lot. A lot of people hated him. But those early Legions for a 14-year-old kid or a 15-year-old kid, they weren't bad at all. I love his early Valiants. I recently picked up the trade maybe 2, 3 years ago of the first four issues of Magnus that he did,
Yeah.
and I reread those, and I thought this is still pretty good. And I remember reading Rye, and I remember reading. I think it was Magnus was a flip book. It was like a flip book. It was like
Yeah.
Magnus and then Rye. But those stories were
Mm-hmm.
cool because like all of a sudden, like they have this big threat and Japan. It's like, okay, everybody's buckle in. And then you find out that Japan is actually a giant like spaceship. It basically becomes like a Megazord. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, holy shit, that's kind of cool. So he would just do different stuff. And I thought it was more of a pure superhero epic. He got rid of the pop balloons. He got rid of the yellow boxes. I never realized how much I hated them until I didn't see them anymore. So
Mhm.
I think he did a lot of good. Yeah, I mean, was he a terrible person? Yeah. Have there been a lot of terrible people in comics? Absolutely. I mean, a
Yep.
lot of people have been like just really fleeced a lot of people. So if you're gonna knock them for that, you're gonna knock a ton of people as well. So that's my thoughts on Jim Shooter. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you that he was a great. I'm just gonna tell you like it's like a lot of great entertainers. You almost have to separate the person from what the art is because like the person themselves, like Pablo Picasso is a genius, but he was
Yeah.
not a good person at all. But you look at the work and it changed art. And so I'm not saying shooters like Picasso. I'm just saying you got to look at, okay, what do they do? Yeah, this sucked, but this is actually a pretty good idea. I think he was good as an editor in chief, but then he decided like I want to start writing too, and then that's when it like his that work wasn't that great. I think the stuff had moved on, but he hadn't moved on. If that
Yeah.
makes sense. So that's my long shooter diatribe. Sorry.
No, it's good. Yeah, no, I think you're on point there. I mean, you know, if you take all the take morality out of it, take, being nice to people and all that out of it, um his job at Marvel was to sell comics, and they sold a shitload of comics. Um,
Hmm.
I think his downfall is when it came to actually dealing with human beings, and he
Yeah.
wasn't really up to that task. But
No.
and he also wasn't a. I mean, obviously at Marvel they wanted to sell comics. They weren't necessarily trying to make high art, but but like as you pointed out, they had quite a few good people working and doing long runs there at the time. Um, and he deserves credit for that. And I think that gets obscured just because of all the soap opera stuff. Um, but those Valiants are great in the sense that they're really stripped down, right? It's just he doesn't have all the continuity behind him. He doesn't have, he's not necessarily worried about every 8-year-old boy needs to understand every single issue. They can
Right.
just start fresh and do their own thing. And I had the Unity crossover, which is basically the last thing he did. He got shit canned right as that was ending.
Yep.
Um, I had that Unity crossover in my top 25. Um, and I'm like you. I really enjoyed those early Valiants. I'm not going to sit here and act like they're the greatest thing ever made, but
No, but I
they're
enjoyed it,
they're pretty
and
satisfying.
I found this on
Oh,
eBay a while
nice.
ago, and I've been looking at this, and it actually does include that big poster of the
Oh,
final
nice.
panel. But I'm also a huge Barry Windsor Smith fan. You put Barry Windsor Smith on it, and I'm gonna probably buy it, especially from
That's
that
a great.
era.
Yeah, that's a great segue because he was the next guy I wanted to ask you about. He shows up on your list a lot, and I know about your affection for him. Um, yeah, talk about Barry Windsor Smith for a minute. Yeah, I know he's like really one of your. Is he your top guy? I know he's right up there.
I would say all time as far as like superheroes, there's Windsor Smith, there's Bill Sienkiewicz, or yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz, that I can think of offhand. I'm going back like talking like an old man, but I always like Barry Windsor Smart. I didn't like his art as much early. I mean, there's a joke that the reason why he was hired was because he was the guy that drew the most like Kirby
Yeah,
when he started out, and it makes sense because he got into comics because of Kirby, um, and that's through interviews that he said. Um, but I think he grew, and he just had a different look. It was almost like poetry. Just I'm not sure what artistic influences because I don't know that much about art, like classic art. I know what I like, but he just had this certain elegance. He didn't do a ton of work, but when he did something, it just looked beautiful, especially that mid 80s after he decided to, he went away and he started doing Gore Blimey Studios and illustration. He came back. He seemed to have grown in that mid to late 80s into like the mid 90s, where just some beautiful work. I mean, just really, I mean, I've always said that the only guy that can make Solar Man of the Atom look cool was Barry Windsor Smith. Everybody else, he looked like a guy in a red spandex one piece. But but somehow Smith was able to add a certain elegance to the body movements, and not just him, but all the characters. Um, and I think he's under-regarded as a writer. Um, that's why I had Archer and Armstrong, his run 0 to 12 on there. Because if you read those books, that's a series that nobody ever talks about. But it was basically Archer and Armstrong. They start off in LA and they do a European tour, and they're in Europe, and that's way, and they end up in London, and then they end up in Los Angeles, so that way you can like take it over. But some of the writing is really good as far as the characterization. Um, I thought, and and I read, Monsters came out 6 years ago, and he just really showed what he could do as far as writing, and he's had one shots here and there, like the Marvel Fanfare collection I'm reading now, the Omnibus one.
Mhm.
He has that Thing story, and it's just I just think he just didn't do a lot of work, but when he did something, it was pretty good. And I just love his art. He just there's a certain thing there that nobody else can draw like that.
Yeah, it's true. He'll do a random issue of Iron Man, and it's
Right,
really beautiful.
right.
Really stands out. And I think he was ahead of his time. Well, I don't know if he was ahead of his time, but he was one of the only guys who would do it where he would do everything, right? He would do his own coloring and pretty much everything but the lettering. I think he would do on some of these random Marvel comics he did.
Right. I remember I spoke to Bob Layton at a con one time, and this is years ago. And he said that when he was working with Barry Windsor Smith and Valiant, Windsor Smith told them, "Okay, I'm going to show you how to ink my work so it looks the most like the way I want to look like." And he said that he says he actually started drawing, so he goes, "I can kind of draw a little bit like him," and he actually like started penciling a little bit, and it looked kind of like Barry Windsor Smith, like not a bad imitation.
Yeah.
But he's like, he was very specific. Like, this is how you have to ink my work. And you're right, he did do the colors. Um, and there was a certain way that he wanted the colors to be on newsprint. This is why he's always been wanting Marvel to go back and say, let me do a reprint of the Weapon X, but let me do it recolored the way I wanted it colored, not the way that it's garish now on the nicer paper. And he's been like
Yeah.
demanding for years, and Marvel won't let him do it. But he's like, I want to do that because that's the way it's supposed to look like, the way it looked like on newsprint. So yeah,
Yeah, it looks so much better as it originally came out than it ever has since.
because he knew like what happened. I think a lot of as I've gotten older, I realized with a lot of the Baxter paper, a lot of the colorists were coloring the books like they were for newsprint, and they weren't adapting for the Baxter papers because they were on. Once in a while, you saw some guys adapt for Baxter paper, and it looked less garish,
Mhm.
but they weren't like adapting. They were saying, "Oh, this is the way we always color," but they weren't saying, "Okay, but the paper interacts differently with the ink, so you have to adjust." Yeah, and but it does look better. You're right. It does look better on newsprint.
Um, I guess it's been, we've been talking for a while and I haven't asked this question. What did you think of the final list?
I thought the final list was. I mean, like, there's so many books here that I haven't read,
Yeah.
and there's so many eras that I haven't read. Like, I'm not the definitive person to say, "Oh, this can't be on it." I had a few things that maybe raised my eyebrows a little bit,
Sure. Yeah.
I question. But I mean, there's no perfect list. There's never going to be a perfect list. There's I mean, I think it's as good as it's going to get. I think it's a pretty
Mhm.
good list. Actually, when I saw the list, I thought, okay, I wasn't that far away because I thought, God, I don't know how I'm gonna. I mean, I wasn't like counting or seeing like where I got it. Just more like, am I kind of with it, or am I like just like really like lost? Um, and um, I thought overall was good. I did go back and looked at some of the items that weren't on the list, and I'm like, well, okay. But I thought overall it's a good list. I mean, you're talking about comics from the 40s and 50s, and a lot of stuff from the 60s that I never read, and there's stuff from the 80s and 90s I never read. So it's like I said, I think it was a pretty good list. I was actually when I saw the list, I was happy I contributed. I was like, I'm glad I'm part of this. I felt really good about it, to be honest with you.
Was there anything from your list that you were really disappointed didn't make it?
Well, now that you say, um,
Yeah, yeah,
okay,
please.
I had Marvel
No,
2-in-1 Annual Number 2, which was the end of the first Thanos saga, which that
yeah.
was when Jim Starlin's art was at, this is before the Dread Star years, when his
Hmm.
art, what I think was peak Starlin. And I just thought that issue was so great because they ended this long storyline with Thanos. In that book, you had Spider Man and Thing in there because Marvel 2-in-1 with the Avengers. But they even had a segue where like Spider Man is like little things like you wouldn't think about. Like Spider Man is there, like, what am I doing here? I can't fight these guys. These are aliens. I'm just a street guy. And he's fighting. And then you see Chaos and Order in the background are like, oh, it's good that we made him like Spider Man because, it's like, this is why we made him Spider Man in the first place. Like, oh shit, there's like something bigger and more cosmic, but there's that little like one panel that they talk about that. I
Yeah,
just thought the end where Thanos is turned to stone, but you see a tear coming out of his eye because he wasn't able to kill everyone and he let down death was like really, really interesting. This whole thing that he's in love with death and he will kill everything to make her happy. And
hmm,
death is like this mistress that like he wants, but she like keeps him at bay. It's like a whole different context. So that was one. Iron Man Demon in a Bottle, that arc, I thought I
yeah,
included that only because that was really way ahead of its time where you're actually talking about alcohol addiction, and that's the thing that's been going on in comics since then.
hmm,
Some of the Spider-Man Tangled Web stories.
yeah,
Um, There's one book that nobody's ever read called The Psycho it was a miniseries by James Hudnall and Jan Brereton. I don't
yeah,
think anybody's ever read it. I don't, but it was one of my favorite comics. Nobody's ever gonna put that on a top 100 list except for me.
hmm,
So I wasn't disappointed. Archer and Armstrong, like I mentioned, the Archer and Armstrong, Barry Windsor Smith
yeah,
one. The Green Lantern, Green Arrow, Daniel O'Neill, Neil Adams books.
yeah,
I thought those were really good for that day. Um, I thought that was really good. So those are like some of the books that I had on my list that I can see why they didn't make it, but those were books that I really dug. And it's like, oh, okay, Demon and the Ball didn't make it. I'm like, okay, that's like an iconic storyline. I can see why the Psycho wouldn't make it. I've been
yeah.
thinking about doing a video of the Psycho as almost a goof, but like, um,
You
well, no,
should.
because no, well, I should because the thing is like at the time it's a present day where instead of nuclear weapons, they discovered how to make superheroes, and so now superheroes are like the threat deterrent.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of Captain America modules, some Marvel homages, but not too obvious. But and and it's not painting. It's sort of like I wouldn't say deconstructionist, but sort of. But like I said,
Okay.
it's a beautiful book. It's those prestige format things that were like $5 at the time,
Yeah, yeah,
but nobody's read it. You can find it in the dollar bins if you can easily. But I mean,
yeah.
Demon in the Bottle, I thought was a classic storyline that might have been included. Those Daniel O'Neill, Neil Adams, Green Lantern, Green Arrow, because they were really because you had Green Lantern who was like up in the cosmos fighting Starro and all these guys, and then you had Green Arrow who was like a three street level guy talking about social issues, and that was at Neil Adams peak art.
Hmm.
Those were the ones that kind of thought, oh, that didn't make it, but I wasn't like upset.
Yeah, I think if we were making this list 20 years ago, um, I bet I bet both the Demon in a Bottle and the Green Lantern Green Arrow stuff would have made it. Um,
Yeah,
I think they loomed larger back then. I think now everything's just fading with time, and
yeah,
it's tougher for things to hang on. I was surprised. Like speaking of Neil Adams, the Batman stuff, which you also had on here, um, that got I think 5 or 6 votes. Like it made the list really easily. I think it was on the final list, um, like number 27, the Neil Adams
right.
Batman. I was stunned it did that well. I wasn't surprised it made the list, but it had a really strong showing.
It's
Um,
Batman.
that
It's
helps. Yeah,
it's Batman. If it was like any other hero, maybe not, but it's Batman. And
Yeah.
he also
I think
defined that look with the long ears, with the long
yeah.
bad ears. There's certain iconic looks that I didn't interrupt you, but he did certain things stylistically that looked kind of cool.
I think those comics hold up a little better too. I think they can, they're not quite as dated as the social issue stuff,
Right.
um, and the art's just as good, if not even better. It's just pretty top notch stuff. I'm not a huge Denny O'Neil fan. He's kind of the common denominator here, um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I had a trade paperback of Demon in a Bottle when I was 13. There were only a few collections back then, of superhero
Right.
comics, and I definitely have read that over and over again.
Yeah.
And I like it. I
Yeah.
like that run.
Yeah, I did too. And just to touch on something that you were saying, the age does matter because I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure if you got somebody that was really young, they would probably put like House of X and Powers of 10 on there.
Mm-hmm.
And they would have done that. They would have said, "Oh man, this is one of the greatest X-Men stories ever." And it's like, okay, that's because you haven't read all the other great X-Men stories before. So age and what you've read does, obviously it impacts everything. So you're right. Some things do fade, but I remember like, okay, that was pretty far ahead of his time. It's still a lingering idea that Tony Stark has an addiction problem. At least I don't know if Marvel's like pushed that to the side, but for a lot of years, that was a whole thing of like
Yeah.
he could, wanting to drink and he couldn't drink. Um, I just thought that was like really kind of ahead of his time, and those were good stories, and the art with Bob Layton was really amazing for the time, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. And then having him step aside and having Jim Rhodes take over, having a black man take over one of
Yeah.
their flagship books was a pretty big deal.
Yeah, that's that shooter just saying, hey,
Yeah.
if we piss off some people, but we sell comics, we sell comics.
Yeah. Here's Vic again with these lists are always fun to talk about. I wonder what my 12-year-old self would think of the list, which relates to what you just said, Ray. Many runs on the list, Alan Moore say, are geared more for older readers who are immersed in comics. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that is true, though. I think a lot of the Alan Moore stuff, especially the DC work, can be enjoyed just on its own. I don't think you
Yeah.
have to be a PhD in comics to enjoy Swamp Thing, but it is geared towards an older reader than Iron
Yeah.
Man.
Okay. I mean, I'm 61, so he started that run in what, 82, 83.
Yeah, that sounds
So
right.
I was like 18, 19
Okay.
when that run started. I wasn't a kid. Maybe if I was a kid, like not a kid, but let's say I was a teenager, like a young teen, it might
Yeah.
not have hit me the same way. So it's like that's the thing about all these lists are subjective, and because our tastes are subjective based on how old we were, what we read, what we liked, uh, the current time, what was available during that current time. There's so many factors. Like I saw some of the people had stuff from the 40s, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't even know that existed. Like Miss Fury, I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I had to look it up. I had to look it up. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that existed. Wow, stuff like that. So it's all subjective. Like I think Gary was the one that said he got out of superheroes in the late 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, I got out of superhero comics around, like 30 years, like 30 years after him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, we're gonna have different perspectives because he's been reading different stuff than I've been reading. I've been doing the crash course on the indie stuff, but um, it's not the same. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm just saying that he has a different perspective, like we all do.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah. Gary's list had tons of stuff on there that I had never read. Um,
Oh God, I
some
feel so
things I
bad.
something.
That's
Oh yeah,
so
some things I'd barely heard of. No, yeah, no need to feel bad. Like, I mean, that was one of the reasons I put in the directives: don't put anything on the list you haven't read, because nobody's read everything. It's impossible. There's, you know, hundreds of thousands of these superhero comics out there. So,
right.
you should just and I knew everybody I was asking to make a list had read a good amount, so it wasn't like, yeah, I wouldn't want someone who'd been reading superhero comics for 5 years to make a list, because you like you said, you don't have any perspective to draw on from the older work. I'd rather have people who've turned their back on them and have to use their memories, um, than people who are, thinking House of X is the best comic they've ever read. Though that did get a couple votes.
Okay, well, I'm not okay. Okay. I'm just going to be clear. I've never read it. I know that it rejuvenated the X Men. I know it did that. Um, and the writer who did the other Secret Wars and all that, whose name escapes me now. I'm not a yeah. I liked his FF run. I
Mhm.
didn't. I, but lately it just seems like people always end up giving him more pages or an extra issue, and nothing more happens. It's just he just extends everything. Like I think he's doing the reboot. Oh my god, you know what? Ever since COVID, my memory's gone to hell. I can't remember his name, but I remember the
Hickman.
comics I read. Hickman, thank you, Jonathan Hickman. Yeah, his FF run was cool. I just think that like when they give him Ultimates, that reboot they did a couple of years ago, and they said, "Hey, we're gonna give him more pages." It's like, no, man, this is like giving an alcoholic more booze. It's like nothing more is gonna happen. It's just gonna get extended over a period of time, and
Yeah.
and so in that respect, I don't think he's a bad writer, but I think in Marvel today, he's one of the best in comics today. Superhero comics, he's one of the best writers available. But that's because I think in a lot of cases the bar has gotten really low, and
Yeah.
so he's good compared to his contemporaries, but I don't think like if you look at everything, like I like New X Men. I like New X Men. I liked a lot because that challenged a lot of things. I like that run. Everybody always took a crap on that run, and then
Yeah.
Marvel's been mining that run for 20 something years, lifting ideas from it. He,
Yeah.
he he
Made
gave a
our
lot of
list.
right. Yeah, I know, and I was very happy to see that. I like that write up too. But I'm just saying that that would have made it. But I never read it, so maybe it really is good. But I knew eventually Marvel would screw it up, and then he got into an argument with Marvel, and then he just left the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're dead on with him. Here's Gary Usher. I think the different perspectives is what make the final list so relevant.
Agreed.
And Yeah, I agree too. I even though it's basically a bunch of middle-aged men. I think we all had different points of view, different, slightly different ages at least,
Yeah.
um, and just like you said, just reading backgrounds, we all came to this stuff a little differently.
Right.
Um, yeah, I guess. I don't know. I know you had your reservations. They sounded like they were more personal reservations, as in you had just sort of you had moved on. But what did you think about the exercise in general? Just the idea of making this list. Did you see any value in it? Um,
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's it. That's it. I trailed
No,
off.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I did actually. I actually am glad I made the list because I had spent all this time kind of like saying, I'm over superheroes. I didn't really like the last few years of what I read.
Mm-hmm.
As much as people like to crap on Axel Alonso's time, he actually did do a lot of interesting things when he left. And then in DC, I couldn't stand what's his name, Dan,
Yeah,
the former
Didio.
publisher. Oh God, I couldn't stand it. And then
Yeah.
when he got demoted and Jeff Johns took over, then I thought, oh, these books are interesting again. Okay, good. He's getting it. But then he got kicked up to movies, and then Dan DiDio took over again, and it was like, son of a bitch. He's done doing everything as New 52 again. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I left superheroes with a really bad taste in my mouth as far as what the product was.
Mm-hmm.
So this exercise and then going back and reading some of this older stuff kind of made me realize, okay, the end stuff wasn't really that great, but there was some things that I really enjoyed that still kind of hold up to the test of time as far as story and ideas. So I'm kind of glad it forced me to revisit that. And um and for that I actually liked the exercise. I think I you kind of like had to like grab me by the scruff of the neck a little bit to do it, but then I'm glad I did it. No, I mean, I'm glad I did. It's like one of those things where like somebody tells you, yeah, you should do this, and you're like, man, I don't want to do it, but then you do, you're like, man, I'm so glad I did that. And sometimes I've learned enough to know that when somebody has an idea, maybe I'm resistant, but I also know, that may not be a bad idea. And I'm glad I did. I've been reading the Marvel Fanfare Omnibus. I got it for Christmas. I've enjoyed that a lot. Seeing these guys that really didn't do a lot of comics do comics. Pete Craig
Hmm.
Russell, Charles Vess, all that. And just some of the stuff I realized, okay, it wasn't all bad. I can just read the stuff that was good. And I mean, like, I think I picked up in the dollar bin, I picked up a um, random Miller Daredevil from that first run, the one where he goes looking for Vanessa. He's in the underworld in the sewers, and he fights that big alligator, and
Hmm.
that one issue. And I thought, this is really still good. It's like you said, cinematic. There's not a lot of words. It's just Daredevil's fighting this big ass alligator in the sewers in New York, and it's visually and that, and it's not like some alligator. I mean, the alligator looks huge. It's like, oh, you look at it, and you're like, okay. So, but the fact that he actually did that, and he said, "This is Vanessa," and he kind of like told the Kingpin, "Okay, I found her for you, so you owe me one." Uh, I thought that was a cool story, and I thought, this was. I remember reading that, thinking, this is still pretty good, and it's 40 something years old. And so
Yeah.
that started getting me to think, okay. And I read, like, I finally read, like, a few years ago, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. And I thought,
Ah, yeah.
this is real. I was like, why did I take so long to read this? I liked it a lot. Um, so it's been good. And a long story short, it's been good for me. I've enjoyed it. I've been able to go back to listen to some of the old hits or read the old hits. But I still love my independent stuff, and I really don't have much of an interest in new superhero stuff.
Mhm.
But that's fine. I'm not the target audience for that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Um, you mentioned a couple minutes ago about the quality of writers, about the crop today, the bar being lower. Um, I agree with you on that. But I know that there's a lot of people out there that they would get really offended by you saying that, and me agreeing with it. But I guess, and not to put you on the spot, but do you think you could explain why that's the case?
Um, I just I think that DC and Marvel, this means superhero houses. Now, like, for instance, like, I've never read Invincible. That's why I didn't put on the list. That's supposed to be very good, and I think Robert Kirkman's a pretty. You can read his stuff and it's not bad. Like, I
Yeah.
love The Walking Dead. I read the whole run. Um,
Hmm.
I think he's a good writer. I think and I've read some of his stuff, and it's good. So maybe this will be an exception, but I think what happened a lot was that when DC and Marvel switched from, hey man, if we don't sell comics, we're going to be out of business, to we're just an IP factory for the movies and for the video games and for the TV shows. I think I think you have a lot of guys that they didn't have to sell a lot of comics or they were going to be out of work. They just had to sell a minimum amount, or maybe get picked up for the movies or TV, and then that would be your value to them. Um, I think there's that, and I also think the thing is like, and I've used this analogy. I think I wrote this on Substack. When Miller took over Daredevil, Daredevil had been around for like 14 years.
Hmm.
So he had 14 years of experience. I mean, of history to deal with. But if you take over Daredevil now, you got 60 years of history to deal with. And what do you reinvent? What do you take out? What do you revisit? What do you change? It's a lot harder now, even if you're a really good writer, to be beholden to 60 years of history and to make something fresh. So I think
Hmm.
that part of the problem. I think um, and part of the and so that's, I think, part of it. But I think also, I just think that you don't have people that have to sell comics or they're going to be out of a job. sell a lot of comics.
Yeah.
Not, because back in the day, if you sold 30,000 issues of something, it's like you're going to get canceled. Now, if you sell 30, 40,000, hey, it's pretty good. And so I think that's where it's changed. Also, there's some writers that I really that get published a lot that I'm not the biggest. I don't hate them. I don't think they're very good, but a lot of people think they're very good. So
Mhm.
I've mentioned them on my Instagram, my Substack very often. Um,
Yeah.
and so I just think that the quality has gotten down in that respect. And I think, these guys have a formula, and they're just going to keep using that formula. I mean, I know that apparently the Daredevil run that's just recently happened, from that one writer. Again, I forget because I don't follow superheroes, but it's supposed to be
Yeah.
pretty good. I think he had a good Batman run. I remember reading his early stuff for Marvel. I didn't dig it, so I just never really read it. But then again, it's like I'm gonna go back and read Daredevil again. Like I read it before Miller. I read the Miller run. I read the second Miller run. It's like I
Yeah.
read the Chris Samney, Mark Waid run, which I like very much, and that was on my
Yeah.
list. I still have those issues. I love that. I loved that run, that whole long run. Um,
Hmm.
but very few guys, I think, can kind of bring a fresh thing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm out of touch too. There's part of that. But I just think that it just seemed like with at the time with Marvel focusing on movies, DC focusing on movies, it just seemed like some of the quality is the same. I think you always had like a bunch of middle of the road guys in comics, but you always
Yeah.
had a few guys that were doing like really special stuff, like an Alan Moore or a Frank Miller or other writers. But then I think over time, that special top tier isn't as special, or it's lowered. And I think that's it. Because, I mean, how many comics in the 80s and the 90s were written by Fabian Nicienza? And I know
Yeah.
he's a fan favorite, but I read those things and it's like, oh my God. But that's just me. And I'm gonna get hate mail for that. But I mean, there's some people you read and you're like, oh, this guy? It's like this guy must he must know somebody at Marvel. It's like, why does he keep getting gigs? Back in the day. So that's always been the case. But I just think now, um, I think now if you're a good writer, also I think a lot of people realize, hey man, if I have a good idea, what am I gonna go to Marvel for? I'm gonna create my own book.
Sure.
And I think that's part of it too. I think a lot of these guys are like, hey, wait a minute, I'll create own property. I'll do my own thing. I'll control it. And then if somebody wants to buy it from a studio, I make the money. Sort of like back in the day, you had to work for Marvel or DC or you couldn't really get into comics. The exception was like Love and Rockets, where you could be a big thing and not have be part of that ecosystem. And in the 90s, Dark Horse came out and doing creator own. But I think that's part of it too, that the best guys are saying, or the good guys are saying, hey, I got this great idea, I know it's going to make money, but I'm not going to give it to Marvel or DC, I'm going to give it to myself. I think that's part of it too.
Yeah. I think you're right. You mentioned, some of the middle guys. Um, I think like those top guys, I also think those top guys don't really exist as much anymore, partially because they go and do their own books at like Image or whatever.
Right.
Um, but also the fans, the modern fans of these comics, and I'm not one of them, so here I am just talking on my ass, but they're so desperate for there to be the next Alan Moore, right? So
Right.
every couple of years they crown a new guy as the next Alan Moore. Meanwhile, they just all kind of do the same cycle. They do a bunch of Marvel DC stuff. They go to Image, maybe they get a job on TV, and they're on to the next guy. But those middle guys, like from the 70s and 80s and 90s, the ones who were just what we would think of as maybe journeymen, or maybe they had a brief time where they were a name. Um, I feel like just the craft was stronger back then because they had to keep the books. They weren't writing for a trade. It wasn't just like, hey, write 6 issues for a that will collect into
Right.
a book. Back then, it
Right.
was we have to keep these plates spinning forever, um, and that there was a certain level of ability that went into that, and actually learning how to do that and keep subplots going. And yeah, a lot of it was dumb, but like you said, they had to sell comics, and so people kept coming back and reading those things over and over again. I mean,
Right.
people make fun of like West Coast Avengers or something, but that book was selling like 250,000 copies a month. Like clearly, people were enjoying it for a period of time, um,
Yep.
and and uh, and I would argue probably if you went back and you ignored the fashion and you ignored some of now it's old fashioned because it was 40 something years ago, but I bet you that the quality of the storytelling is probably better than a lot of the stuff that comes out now. And
Right.
certainly the drawing and the
Yeah.
coloring, is better than what they have now.
Yeah.
And I know I
That's
sound like
part
an
of.
old guy, but I honestly think it's true. I don't think it's just nostalgia. I really believe that.
Well, it's just, I guess, what you like, and I think part of it wasn't so much also the writing, it's also the art. Like now, everything is very manga anime based.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me wrong, I like manga. I read manga. I
Me too.
like anime, but I think a lot of that craft is gone. And I think they're saying, "Hey, young people read manga, and manga." One of the greatest artistic invasions ever made was that manga caught on with young people, and it's just selling like hotcakes. And it's good for comics, good for stores. I'm happy, um, and I was late to the manga game too. Um, but they're saying, "Hey, manga sells, so we're gonna do more stuff like manga." And there was a while where, in the '90s, every woman was drawn really voluptuously, like impossibly sexy. And then they got away from that and they said, "Hey, look, man, women who are athletic have to have an athletic build. So they're not going to have like basketballs on their chest and fight superheroes. They're going to be more athletic." But
Mm-hmm.
now you've seen going back to like, no, we're going to make them voluptuous and impossibly sexy again. But I don't know if that's just to compete because it's a different era now. But it's sort of like you see it now and it's like, okay, this is just like titillating stuff. And I mean, and you just look at the covers. I don't even like read the books because I don't. You know that I'm a weirdo. I don't go to a local comic book store. I do everything mail order through Phantom of the Attic in Pittsburgh. But you see the covers online and you're like, okay, these two voluptuous women are on the cover. Are they like teaming up or are they kind of like eyeing each other a little bit? And it's fine if they are. I don't care. But it's sort of like it's gone back to that kind of style. I think we got away from that with Darwin Cook when you redesigned Catwoman, and then it started coming back to that. And I think some of the craft isn't as strong as it was back in the day. Not every artist that was back in the day was a good artist, but there was a lot more emphasis, like you said, on craft. Like, this is how you storytell. I think the image guys blew all out to hell and said, "Hey man, we can't do storytelling for shit." But guess what? We sold 2 million copies of X-Men. Eat it. And they were right. And the thing is, just side
Yeah.
note, I used to think Todd McFarlane sucked at storytelling, but then I got a trade of during his Hulk run, written by Peter David, who was one of my favorite superhero
Yeah.
writers of all time. And I read this and I thought, man, McFarlane could really storytell. Like, what happened? I mean, if you look at the art, it looks really, it fits perfectly. It's good. And you're like, okay, I know I can see why. But then he was just kind of like, hey, I'm just going to draw this cool pose and that cool pose. And I think those guys showed Marvel that you don't really have to do that. The craft doesn't matter if you draw buff guys and half naked women and dramatic poses bending over and weird awkward angles. And unfortunately, they were at the time they were right. So I think,
Yeah.
and I think that's why a lot of emphasis on art has gone down too, because now they're realizing it's like, hey, you got to do some eye candy here.
Yeah, one of the guys who contributed to this list, Jake Zalaki, he is he actually just finished up a book. He wrote a book about Spawn as like a cultural object, not really like
Okay.
not necessarily like breaking down the series or anything, but like as a just yeah, as a cultural object. It's like an academic book. And one of his chapters is about how Todd McFarlane was really one of the first guys to say, every cover is just going to be unrelated to the insides completely. It's just going to be basically a really good looking pinup. And he had that whole run of covers he did for Classic X-Men where the covers had almost nothing to do with the stories. And of course he knew the stories because they were reprints of old Claremont stories. So it wasn't like he hadn't been told or something. They basically just let him do whatever he wanted because he was becoming a superstar.
Right.
And in this chapter, he makes that argument that kind of like, yeah, these guys went from like Image was really appropriate as the name because they were much more interested in just poses and striking images that teenage boys would like and that would sell for original art purposes, big splash pages.
Right.
And a lot less interested in the panel storytelling. Because like you said, McFarlane could do that. He was a good storyteller. Even Rob Liefeld did a Hawk and Dove miniseries at DC that people loved and were really excited about him. And then they became just dismayed because he went on very quickly, threw all of that out the window, and it all just became guns and pouches and breasts and
pouches.
Let me appeal to 12-year-olds. And like I said, I was one of those 12-year-olds, so I get it. But
right. Yeah, you gotta give people what they want, and you gotta sell comics. So
right.
if that's what they want, you gotta give it to them. I understand that. I mean, I'm a capitalist. I mean, I'm not a billionaire, but I'm a capitalist. I understand you gotta make money.
Yeah.
But I just think that some of the craft has gone down. Seeing guys change, like I remember Bill Sienkiewicz when he looked like Neil Adams the clone. And then during Moon Knight, I wrote an article for one of your previews of Canon where he just decided, hey, I'm doing my own freaking thing. And so when he hit when he hit New Mutants, everybody's like, what the hell's this? And it's like, okay, this is the guy who's been gestating in Moon Knight Lab, coming up with his own style. And then Marvel's saying, yeah, you know what? That doesn't look like anything else we're doing. Go with that. Yeah, I know. And Jim Shooter was smart because he was like, half the people that write love it and half the people hate it, but they all buy comics.
Yeah.
Even if they hate it. That's where I thought like some of his brain worked. Like he just cared about selling comics. But I didn't mean to segue off of that, but yeah, I mean, I don't blame. I mean, I was actually stunned because I didn't read McFarlane back then when he was young. But I read that whole story. I was like, man, McFarlane could really storytell. He was good at this stuff. And I mean, like Eric Larson could always do it, and he still does it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he didn't. There's striking images and stuff, but there's storytelling there. I know you're a huge fan of his, but if you look at his early Spider-Man stuff, it's like, oh man, this is like a Ditko homage, in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And so I just think, yeah, I believe it. He just like. Yeah, I mean, when he did that Spider-Man book that he wrote and drew, that was terrible to read. But I mean, he pushed the limit as far as how undressed Mary Jane Watson could be in that book.
Sure, yeah.
And he was the first guy. I mean, Mary Jane Watson was always known to be this model, and she was attractive, and she was, really attractive, and she was this attractive redhead and all that. But he was the first guy, I think, that was really like, no, man, she is like a baddie. She's like a 10 plus, and I'm gonna draw her like a 10 plus. And he was successful. And then everybody else was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do that too. And then they got away from it, but now they're getting back into it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm so divorced from what they do. Like, when I used to do those previews videos, I would look through all the Marvel and DC. Well, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't. The Marvel and DC, I would skip straight to the trade paperbacks.
I remember. I used to sit there and say, "Oh, Marvel and DC. Okay, nothing's interesting here." It's cast aside. I'm sorry, George.
Yeah. But a couple times a year, I would flip through just to see what is here, and it would just be. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I thought this is what they're trying to sell to people. And not even trying to sound like a snob or anything. Just because I'm not above reading a Batman comic or something. but it just seemed, wow, these guys have just continued to climb up their own ass for so long that whoever this is appealing to, it has to just be getting smaller and smaller.
Right.
And to get back to the point of this whole talk, which was this list, I think most of the comics on this list are things you could hand someone, preferably someone who doesn't hate superheroes, but you could hand most of these comics on the list and say, you'll be able to at least see why a group of guys thought these might be worth looking at. Like
Right.
there's good storytelling, there's maybe interesting storytelling, some really good art, or at least fundamentally sound art.
Right.
And I do think we were successful putting together a pretty good list. I mean, like, there's comics on here I don't like, and there's comics on here I haven't read.
Same.
But I understand why people voted for the ones they voted for. There wasn't one comic where I was like, who would vote for this piece of shit? Like, I understood, even the ones I didn't like. I get why people would like it and would vote for it.
Yeah. I agree. I felt the same way. I mean, there's some things that I'm like the only thing that bugged me on this list, and I actually had to write it down.
That was my next question.
Okay. Number 54, Silver Surfer Parable. Okay, I have Parable. I've read it in multiple formats. I have that little sweet hardcover that I bought for like next to nothing last year.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm a huge Mobius fan. I forgot to add, Mobius is on that high list for me. Like Mobius, like I've always said probably on the Mount Rushmore of comic book artists, there's Mobius, there's Jack Kirby, there's Osamu Tezuka, and I don't know who number 4 is. So I put Mobius at that level, but the story was just terrible. This and apparently the conspiracy theory is that Stan Lee was in Hollywood trying to get a movie deal, and he was convinced that Silver Surfer was the dude. So he kept trying to do these Silver Surfer pitches, and but Mobius came up with the story basically. He said it, and then Stan Lee just did the writing. But Mobius doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know the history, and he's got a whole different attitude. He's from France. He's done different types of comics. So that was one. I was like, okay, I can see what's on the list because it's Mobius, but I don't 54. I'm like, 54. Okay, whatever. But the one only bone I really have to pick is that Hawkeye by Fraction and David Aja. I think Aja or Aja, I don't know, or Aja, was number 35.
Mm-hmm.
How could that be one ahead of Swamp Thing by Alan Moore? That's the only real bone I have to pick, because I only read 2 issues of Fraction's Hawkeye back in the day when it was on. I'll tell you, I didn't read the whole run. But it was this whole Russian mobster thing where they were all in track seats and they all kept saying bro to each other. And I'm like, okay, David, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, so I apologize for mispronouncing. I'm assuming it's.
Yeah, go ahead. I think your pronunciation is gonna be way better than mine.
Because I'm thinking I think he's Spanish or Hispanic, so I'm gonna say Aja. I mean, I can see his art is very stripped down, very minimal, but it's really good. But I just keep seeing these Russian mobsters and Hawkeye be this total loser. He's a part of the Avengers, and in his real life, he's a total loser. And these Russians kept just saying, bro. And people were like, no, but that's part of the fun. I'm like, this sucks. I didn't think about it. I know people, it made the list. I know people love that book. But like I'm like, okay, how did this get ahead of more Swamp Thing? That's like a close, and I mean, it's a list. It's not my control, but I'm like, really? I mean, I'm
so glad you brought it up. And
you know me, I'm gonna like share my opinion and hopefully not offend anybody.
No, I mean, that's the thing. It's a group list, and there are things on my list that people would hate. There are things on your list people. It's like, it's fine, right? It's our lists, and then we put them together so you get this list that is an imperfect union.
Absolutely.
I also hate that comic. I hate that comic. I think the art is really good. And I think David Aja was really carrying the water on that series. If you read the issues past his art, it gets unreadable. Like I checked all of those out from the library, the trades, and read them all, and I was hate
Right.
reading it by the end. I couldn't fucking stand it. And
um,
and 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 I knew that it was going to make the list. Like I knew people liked it.
right.
I knew it was going to make the list. I was really bummed it was that high. But you're right.
Right.
It's so funny that it's one ahead of Swamp Thing. It's actually in between Daniel Clowes and Alan Moore, which is hilarious to me.
Now, if you
It's
ask
like,
Matt Fraction, he would tell you that that's where he should be. And I remember that he was that just a quick segue. He was one of those writers that said, I'm going to go to Hollywood because I'm too good for comics. Now, I think Rick Remender actually did write a lot of TV. So
probably,
I
yeah.
think it was him because he went from Captain America to like writing TV. So he actually did it, but a lot of these guys, including Fraction, went up there and really didn't do a lot of writing for TV and then came back to comics. But there's this whole group of guys who are like, I'm gonna go to Hollywood because I'm too good. Look at my comic I already sold, and I think like a guy like Tom King, like I know that he's like the showrunner of Miracle Man, the animated series, which means I'm probably not gonna watch it. But I think he's smart enough to know that it's the
Disgusting.
artist that he's on his books and
Yeah.
not him necessarily that are doing most of the heavy lifting. Like I read the first 6 issues of the Human Target, and that art is I mean that art is just amazing. I just love the art, but the story I was like, why is Guy Gardner being like a real? I mean, he's usually grumpy, but it's like, dude, you're like, it's almost like you're like want to rape this female. It's like, dude, what's the matter with you? I like some of the writing, some of the characterization I didn't like, but I know that they're gonna base a Supergirl movie on the miniseries that he did with Bleekus Elvey, who's a beautiful wonderful artist, just really great. But I think he knows enough to know like his limits. And I think a lot of guys like Fraction were like, no, I'm going to go to Hollywood. And they had to come back and I'm going to do Jimmy Olsen now. And I heard that story was fun. And I think Steve Lieber did the
Yeah.
art. So he's a good artist. So you got to really work to make that book not work.
Yeah, here's Harvey Picar's Ghost. Remender wrote for video games, not so much for TV outside of Deadly Class. Fraction has written a bunch for TV. I think your point still stands, Ray, though. I think a lot of these guys think they're going to go be auteurs, and that doesn't really end up happening very much. Whereas, like Ed Brubaker has gone on to write a bunch for
Brubaker.
Hollywood.
That's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not Remender. I know Remender is about Brubaker because he actually did write a lot for Hollywood. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, and Brubaker has a show. Like there's a criminal show is coming. And also, Brubaker never abandoned comics. He still kept his hand in the whole time through.
Right.
I would say that of that class of writers, I think Brubaker is kind of head and shoulders above all those guys.
Absolutely.
Yeah, personal favoritism, of course, but Matt Fraction's not a favorite for me in general. But yeah, that Hawkeye run is especially aggravating to me, mostly because of the praise it got. It wasn't so much that people liked it. It was that you would have thought it was Watchmen at the time. People were just falling all over themselves to praise it. And when you read it, you're like, okay, like, he has the issue where the pizza dog goes around and follows everything. And it has little dotted lines.
Yes.
And it's like people have never read a Family Circus comic strip. Like,
Yeah.
They've never seen a diagram. They've never read a Chris Ware comic. Like, so they think this is genius. And people have done this kind of shit before.
Well, again, it's what you've read. I mean, I remember being in a Facebook group a few years ago, and I remember somebody said, "Oh, I think Mr. Miracle by Tom King is one of the greatest comics ever made." And I replied, "You haven't read enough comics."
Yeah.
Because I remember when I bought that, I was reading the miniseries because I love Mr. Miracle. And I remember reading the last issue, and I read the last issue. I closed it. I just sat there for like 30 seconds in silence. And then I went to no one in particular. I said, "This is it." And that's the last time, one of the few times I get emotional about anything. And I'm like, okay, You're not Alan Moore. Stop trying to be Alan Moore. Just be you. And that's and but people have told me that's one of the greatest comics I've ever read. And it's like, okay, you haven't read enough comics. Like you need to read a lot more. Then you can go back in context. But if you're new, you think it's the greatest thing, like you said, because the first time you've seen it, but you didn't know anybody else did it. It's
Yeah.
like it's like music. You hear a certain type of music, and you're like, "Oh, that's cool." And it's like, okay, but you do know, like that's a sample from this guy who did this 30 years ago, and
Mhm.
people don't know that unless you tell them. But in comics, there's no way to tell. But that you're right about that cycle. There's always some hot guy that's around for 2 or 3 years, and everybody thinks he's the greatest thing. I think Donnie Cates is like that. Like
Yeah.
he was on the scene, he was writing everything, he was a hot guy. He actually did a lot of interesting comics. I like this stuff. And then I don't know what he's doing.
I
Like,
think he had I think he had personal issues.
oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I didn't know
Yeah, I think
that.
he had like
I really, I
drug.
really didn't know that. I really didn't know that. But that
Yeah.
happens though with other writers. Sometimes they get really hot. There's the one guy, I forget his name. He's the one that did the Batman run. He's doing the Daredevil run. Um, he's a current
Zdarsky.
writer. Yes, Zdarsky. I read his early stuff and I didn't like it, but that was
Mhm.
also under the old Marvel editorial, so maybe it's better. But apparently he's well regarded. I
Yeah.
just don't read superheroes, but apparently he's well regarded by a lot of people, and people that read a lot of comics. So I think he's probably pretty good because I know his Batman run was well regarded, his Daredevil run is well regarded. So he's probably a guy that's probably pretty good, but that's just based on what I've seen, but I don't know. And he's been around for a while.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. I have to wait and see what people say because I'm not really going to go check it out myself. But if people do want to know some good comics to find, they can check out Die with Your Mask On, number
Yes,
3,
please.
the whole point of this discussion. And Ray, I think we can call it there. Um,
Yeah, I didn't mean to take up this time, but
no, you're good. You're good.
it's the Cuban in me. Once you get me talking, you got to
I
hit that
appreciate.
red button.
Yeah, no, no, I appreciate it so much. I appreciate you coming on here, and I'd love to do this again soon about something that's not about superheroes. So, um,
Yeah, anytime you would think that having me on would be a good thing, you let me know. I'm very glad to participate. I really just am glad to be part of the fandom and to like give back in some small microscopic way.
yeah, you're doing more than that. So
Thank
everyone
you.
go check out Ray's channel. Is it RC Comics? Is that how you
Yes,
find it on YouTube?
RC underscore comics, I think. But
Okay.
yeah, um, I just do intermittent YouTube videos. I've been trying to be better about it. I just review what I like to review, um, and it could be anything. Um, and once in a while, I'll put my Instagram channel. I'll put reels on with some quick thoughts because now reels can go for 90 for 3 minutes, so you can get a lot done in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And just things that I find interesting or quick takes. Um, I also have a lot of opinions that, not to be divisive, but I do have opinions, and once in a while those get on there. So sorry in
Yeah.
advance.
No, don't no need to apologize. Um, it's it's what we should want out of people is to hear what they actually think about things and what's going on in the world. And I want to just say I love your channel. You're one of only a couple channels I watch every single video.
Oh, that's
Um,
kind of you to say. Thank you.
and
So,
your Love and Rockets videos especially I think they're the highlight. But just anything Ray is reading, he's talking about, I highly recommend anyone to go check out. But the Love and Rockets videos, I think, as someone who's been reading Love and Rockets for a long time, I really get a lot out of your analysis of those books as you get through them. And I would hope more people would check them out, even people that are familiar with the comics. I think you'll get a lot out of hearing what Ray has to say.
okay, well, that's very kind of you, especially from you. Um, I have to do I have to do volume 9, and I'm starting to read volume 10. So,
Nice.
but I can see why it became what it became. it's so, I don't want to take it longer, but it's just so out of the box.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation for another day. But thank you very much for having me on, Colin. It was an absolute pleasure for me.
Yes. Thank you, Ray. I appreciate you. And thanks to Vic Shade, Gary Usher, who popped in for a second, and Harvey Picar's Ghost for making comments, and for anyone who watches us in the future. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys.